to get by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three of the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
I don't know. I don't think it's that bad at all. Honestly, like, at least on paper, I don't think you're as bummed as you might be if you wanted to say watching. 8-50, that's not bad. For a rookie, if you finish the year with, maybe you hope he gets to 15. Yeah.
For Cutter Goche? Yeah, I mean, it's not what we wanted.
No, you hope he gets 20, but like realistically.
Go back to our season preview, and I'm sure the optimism was flowing heavy. And we were saying he would score.
I'm pretty sure you said he would win the Rocket in his rookie year, and I was like, "Wow, Eddie, calm down."
Yeah. He was going for what is it? Gretzky had what? Was it 92? Is his season record or something like that? What's the most in a season? It's 92,
goals?
Right? Yeah.
Okay, you're not talking about a rookie season.
By Wayne? No. I'm just talking in general. Oh, it's Solani's the rookie
76
record holder. Right? It's like 70, 76. Yeah. So
for a team that doesn't exist.
77. Yeah. How do you? Oh, so speaking of teams that don't exist, it doesn't really transition that well. But I asked you this earlier, the Utah situation with the three names that they've announced. What was the one that there was one that they wanted to do, but they couldn't get a trademark. Was it that Huskies or was
Yetis.
it something else? Yetis, right. What do you think about them having one of the three names they're deciding between being Utah
That's my favorite.
Hockey Club? Oh, God. I was afraid you would say that.
Why?
I hate it. I just hate it. Like, it's just... I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like it. It just feels like a placeholder, because that's what it was. And then they're just like, you know what? What if we kept it?
I like it. I've liked it from the beginning. They have the idea of we're Utah Hockey Club, and then like they have like a pseudonym or whatever you want to say, like a mascot name. And like but it would be like honestly to me, it's not that big of a deal because it reminds me of college, where it's like you play for the university of this or that, and then you're also these, right? So like,
yeah, but like, it's fine in like a situation where like multiple teams also have that. Like, it's fine in
that's an interesting
like in soccer where it's like they're all football club or something like that, right? Like there's 3 or 4 different variations that they go by. Like in college, it makes sense because they're all the university of
such
or
and such university,
something
right.
like that, right? But it just stands out in a really awkward way for me amongst the rest of the team names, where every other team has some sort of actual like name with it, and to just be like, it was the placeholder, and it was presented as this is a placeholder until we figure out our name, and then just be like, guess what? It's one of the 3 options of what we could be named forever.
I will grant you that the process makes it look worse, but I think if they had just come out from the jump and been like, we're the Utah Hockey Club, that's just what we are. Sure, but it wouldn't feel as fucking like, well, I guess we'll try. Maybe, shit, they won't let us have all the other things we want. That's the problem. Is it feels janky because of exactly what you said, where it's like it's going to be a placeholder. But like, I like the name. I would be totally cool with that being the name. But they've certainly bungled the whole rollout and like killed any goodwill that they might have in trying to make that the club. Like I dig it. I think it's fun. Like UHC would be fun, and like it's a bigger bummer to me that they don't have purple in their color scheme.
Mm-hmm. Like I feel sort of justified as well in that they got bullied into taking one of the names off the list because nobody knew what it was. I was reading through the list the other day. The Wasatch. I read that. I had no idea what it was. I also didn't look it up, so that's fair. But it's just funny that they got bullied off that, and then now it's between Utah Mammoth and Utah Outlaws. I feel like I like the Outlaws probably the best, and honestly, that seems like since they literally got bullied into putting that on there with the fan vote. People are saying like I have no idea what a Wasatch is. Let's make them the Outlaws. I feel like that's potentially going to be the one that wins. I'm fine with that.
Fine. It's
we were talking about like when Las Vegas was coming in that they were going to be called the Bandits, right? Like somebody was going to piggyback on that at some point.
Yeah, like it makes sense. Like, like we have like the Cowboys and shit like that. Like it's the same idea. It's just it would be very funny like to watch, such a conservative in like demeanor league at a time like now. I'd be like, oh yeah, we're also like our new team is the Outlaws. Like that's just really funny to me because it's like, no, you guys are nerds. It's okay. I like Mammoth. I think the iconography of Mammoth, like the big tusks and the trunk and all, I think that's dope. Like I would not mind the Mammoth. Like I don't think there's a bad one on there. I think Outlaws feels the fakest because it feels
no. Utah Hockey Club feels the fakest.
No. Because like the Outlaws feels like the team that's the rival high school in like a movie. It's like, oh, they're the Outlaws. Like, you know what I mean? Like, It feels very like contrived. I think their best option actually at this point is probably Mammoth, but like Outlaws would be cool, but it would be just kind of funny. Like, you guys are dorks. It's fine. Unless they're going to totally lean into the fact that they got kicked out of their last city. If they are willing to lean into the fact that they got kicked out of Arizona,
they won't.
Then I would 100% be here for them to be the Outlaws. That would rock. If they would just like actively antagonize Arizona, I would let them be Outlaws so fast. That would rock.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way that they're, like you said, the league's too conservative for them to even try and get away with that.
Yeah, very buttoned up.
So we're here right after the Ducks played the Flames, and Matt Coronado dropped a hattie on us. And from all things considered, when I tuned into the game on and off, that it was a underwhelming game. And I love that social media people for the Ducks put out, oh, our winning streak ends, as if we were a team that goes on them often.
It's weird that it's like sometimes kind of a bummer to like get up to watch the games, because like I don't feel like the players are enjoying it. But I will say this, like I did feel like in this game, like you actively saw the players get more and more annoyed as the game went on, and almost just being like kind of like, fuck this, we're just gonna do whatever. And like that's like definitely bad in the terms of like that means they're clearly not listening to the coach, but it certainly led for far more interesting hockey. Like Trevor Zegras getting into it with Pashal, or however you say it. I don't know how to say his last name, and Uyghur. That was fun. Like, it was good to see them kind of grow into the game and like kind of how annoyed they were being as they were playing. And then, we got the Trouba hit, the Trouba fight. And there was a couple like, I don't want to say like tussles, but like scrums. Like it was good to see that kind of come out of the team tonight. But other than that, like, I don't know, man. Like, is there anything you're excited about with this team?
You get it in like little bursts, like McTavish's 4-game stint there, where he was, he put up 6 goals over 4 games. You get kind of excited, and you hope, like, again, the only positive we're hoping for from the season, we didn't expect them to be great, and if they pushed for a wild card spot, great. But it was that the kids take steps forward and look good. So when one of them starts playing well, like early on in the season, it was Leo Carlson was playing great, then Zellweger was playing really good. You had Lacombe, obviously, who stepped in and played well, and McTavish and glimpses. Zegras is back in the lineup. He's looked pretty good. So, like, you look for those little things, but, like, that's few and far between. It's inconsistent this year because you get games like this where really nobody looks good at all.
I'll tell you what,
So
Drew Hellison had himself a shift tonight where I watched him play, and I was like, oh, I would trade Tristan Luneau this summer. Like, he's got that in him. Like,
I mean, Tristan
that,
Luneau's
but that's
stock's
what I'm
pretty
saying.
high right
Like,
now with the way he's playing.
the idea of, like, Hellison being realized in Luneau, but then it's just like, oh, yeah. But then that means in 2 years I'm either extending both of Trouba and Gudas, or I have to go out and find another right-hand defenseman. It's like, oh, maybe Noah Warren is ready at that point, or Stolberg is ready and he plays his offside, or whatever it is. But it's just like, you can't. If you're gonna trade one of them, I do think the one you have to trade is. I don't know how I got here. Like, this is so weird, but like, Hellison looked really good tonight, and he made it or he had a couple of shifts where he looked really good, and you saw what he could be, and that was that. And Trevor Zegras responding and getting chippy, I think, were the two highlights of the night for me. And beyond that, like you said, that game was rather unremarkable.
Yeah. It's been a while since we have so much to cover, and like the little things keep popping into my head. But there's one thing we have to cover, a signing that we have to cover, a rumored eventual signing for the Ducks that we have to cover, because he's our boy, and we got to give some props where they're due. Artem Galimov, at some point this year, reported by Elliot Friedman that he's going to sign with the Ducks. I had to get that in because it just popped back in my head, and I'm glad I remembered it. I'm so happy.
Dude,
about
it
this,
rocks.
man. I'm so happy.
It's,
about this.
we saw a few years ago that he had like these flashes of skill and these amazing highlight plays, and to hear that his game has come far enough along that like Pat Verbeek is like actively interested in signing him to a contract and getting him over here and seeing what he can do is really, really cool. And it's the type of player and draft pick that, if it hits, can have a meaningful impact on a team's ability to contend. And that is, putting the cart 4 blocks ahead of the horse. But the idea that he's even on their radar to a point where he could come over is so exciting that it's worth kind of giving yourself a minute to be ridiculous about.
Yeah, I mean, he completely fell off of like my hopes and dreams of coming over and playing for the Ducks over the last couple of years. Like, his last 2 KHL seasons before this were not great by any means. He had 13 points in 63 games and 11 in 51 games last year. And then all of a sudden this year he's got 43 points, 23 goals in 48 games. And he's in top 10, I think, in KHL in scoring. Like, that's enough to get noticed for sure. And yeah, man, it's fun. It's a fun one. Like, we've liked him since he got drafted because he shows up with the highlight reel plays. But it was one of those guys you're like, oh, this is fun to see this, but like, he's probably never, with the way he's playing, the production, everything, he's probably never going to make it over here. This seems like a guy who's eventually going to wear out his signing rights and just stay in Russia. Maybe one day will make his way over. When he's like 30 down the road to get a taste of the NHL. But it's cool to see. Like, it's obviously nice to see him playing well, and it's like a little added layer of surprise to the Ducks prospect pool that you didn't expect, right? Like, we've seen Pasterov play well this year, which is great, and he's been on a heater, so it's nice to see him do well. We talked about Luneau and Hellison and guys like that, and we got back at Seneca playing well in the OHL. So it's like guys you expect, but then all of a sudden for Galimov to pop back up on the radar, like, yes, he'll be a rookie when he comes, but he'll be, I think, 26 when he plays next year. So certainly, it's almost operates more of like a free agent signing more than anything, right? Like, you're bringing in a guy with a lot of experience, and I kind of like that better. I'm not like, don't get me wrong, like, the team's got a lot of young players, and but guys like Pasterov, it's not like I would love it, but it's not like he's going to step in next year and be able to be making an immediate impact. There's a better chance that a guy like Galimov could come over. He's played in the KHL for the last like 4 or 5 seasons. Could come over and be able to make an immediate impact in the top 6. There's just a better chance of that, and it's nice to have that kind of ace in the hole in your back pocket to be able to go into next season and provide. We don't really need more optimism because we're full of it at the start of the season, but I know the tank will be full next year with Galimov entering the fold.
No, it's perfect, right? Because like, it's the type of thing where like I said, like as far as a team being able to take that next step and be competitive in a more meaningful way, like dropping in a first year player who's 3 years ahead of his like status in the league just by development is huge, right? Because like you're dropping in what's technically a rookie, but it's also a dude who's 26. He's played pro hockey for a while. One of the reasons he kind of fell off of everybody's radar was he signed a pretty big extension with Zagreb. I think it's Zagreb is where he plays. So like, and so he signed a big extension to stay there. So it was like, okay, we know what this is, and like you said, his rights expire or something like that, and it just is what it is, and he stays over there, and cool. But to see his production take the leap this year, to see his role expand, and then to see that the team is making a concerted effort to make sure they sign him in his last year of what do you call it with the team of like signing rights is really exciting, and it provides, like you said, like a free agent level excitement, but with a prospect level storyline, and it's a lot of fun. And so it gives fans someone to be like think about it this way. Troy Terry, this guy is drafted in like the 7th round, and he doesn't play in the NHL for like 4 years. And then you're just like, oh yeah, this guy rocks. Like, it's just fun. Like, if he can be some 75% of that, you're in a really good spot with your depth when you're trying to take that next step forward.
Yeah, and he's just a lot of fun. I mean, as much as he's a flashy player, he's a guy that plays in all situations for his team in the KHL. I think he has like 3 shorthanded goals on the season. He plays power play, he plays penalty kill. So he's been utilized in all situations this year. And the crazy thing too is like his time on ice per game is really nothing different from last year. So it's crazy to jump from like 11 points in 51 games. I don't know what's gone right for him this year. Might have just figured things out. And even those years where the production has been down, Kazan hasn't been a bad team. Like, he's been on good teams where they have been near the top of the standings in the KHL, and the points just haven't been there for him. So everything just is somehow aligned for him this year, and it's obviously put him back, or at least higher in the queue of Pat Verbeek's radar. And I'm pumped about it, just to see something a little different come into the locker room. But there'll be a lot of competition. Actually, I think we're going to see a lot of turnover because obviously, Beckett Seneca will likely be pushing for a spot next year. And we just talked about Pastuov as well, a guy who should get some looks before the end of this year.
Wait.
But
before you follow this thread where it is inevitably going, I want to cut you off. Do you know what we haven't talked about yet?
Ducks related or non-Ducks related?
Cam Fowler.
No.
We haven't talked since Cam Fowler got traded.
Yeah, let's just we don't need to worry about that.
The only reason I bring it up is because you were making the very real point that this team is going through the turnover, right, of moving on from some of these veterans or more long-standing players, and we're going to see these younger guys come in. And one of the questions I was thinking of asking you was, do you think Alex Killorn gets traded this summer? And then I was like, oh shit, we still have Gibson, and we did trade Cam Fowler, and we haven't talked about the Cam Fowler thing. So I want to stick with what you were talking about as far as the roster and the young players that we're excited for, but with the deadline coming up, with there being no roster freeze for the Four Nations tournament, do you think we see any surprising players on the Ducks get moved?
I think it's possible. I mean, obviously now, one of the guys we said was probably going to get traded at some point was Vetrano, and then obviously the extension comes in, which I think is also something that we haven't talked about. The joys of not doing this for a while. I don't know about surprising. Like, I think Robbie Fabry probably gets traded if there's any interest in him. John Gibson's name will be out there, but it just depends on how long the suitor list is. I think Dumoulin ends up getting traded, which hopefully gets Olin Zellweger back into the fucking lineup at some point here. But beyond those guys, like what would be surprises? Like Killorn, Terry, Strome, guys like that. Like, those are really the only guys that you could see from that group get moved.
There are
right?
two definitive potential surprises to me. And I think both of them would not happen until the summer. But Killorn and Gudas.
Gudas would be that it would be wild to give him the captaincy and trade him in season. But summer for sure you could see it. But in season would be wild.
Because I could see them deciding that they don't want Luno to be the 7th D. They want him to be the 6th D. And they think that they can go Hellas and Trouba Luno. And then have, you know, Lacombe, Zellweger,
It's
Mitchell
not out
on
of
the
the
other side.
question. Gudas will get 1 year. Like next year's his last year on this current contract. So to say you could trade him in the summer, it's not possible, right? Like it's not like he's got a long-term contract, or it's not like you just signed him to a new deal or anything like that. Where so it's definitely possible. And like again, the Ducks wanted to name a captain. He happened to be the guy. I don't think that hinders anything, especially if guys like Luneau are knocking on the door and they want to give this guy some ice time. So I don't know if this year is any indication of that. We'll sign 4 veteran defensemen and play none of our young players next year. So, but Luneau seems like if things continue to go the way they go this year, he shouldn't be back in the AHL next year. Like he's proving at this point. It took him a little bit this year, but he's the run he's on right now. I think he's got like 11 points over his last 4 games. If he can continue that across the rest of the season, there's no reason to send him back, and he'll basically play his way onto the roster at that point. Zellweger, Minchikov, Helleson, Lacombe, if they're all still here, they should play. That leaves Trouba as the remaining kind of veteran on this team. And then I don't think after acquiring Trouba, they're going to look to trade him. So then Gudas becomes the odd man out, like you said there. So I don't think it's impossible. The only way Gudas probably sticks around or becomes the guy you don't trade is if one of those younger players are used in a bigger trade. We've discussed that before. Lacombe or Zellweger is probably the likely two. Maybe Luneau as a guy that gets included in that. Helleson potentially. It just depends on what type of deal we're talking. Obviously, we spoke about Rantanen, and that situation's been resolved on the trade front. We've talked about Elias Pettersson, among others as well, but in fact, we've already talked about it, so I guess we can't ignore it now. But the Rantanen situation was wild. I was out of town when you sent that to me. I was like, "There's no way." No, originally you sent me Taylor Hall was traded.
Yeah, well, because originally that's what I heard. And I was
Carolina.
Like, Taylor Hall to Carolina. Like they're kind of finally getting someone interesting. And it's like, okay, that's fine. That makes sense. Hopefully he'll do good under Rod. And then, it became Mikko Rantanen is also in the trade. What do you mean also in the trade? It's a Mikko Rantanen trade now. There isn't, And then it comes out that Marty Nichas is going the other way. And then it's supposed to be Kakanyemi. And then it turns out to be Jack Drury. Like, that was a blast of a saga. That was a very enjoyable trade break in terms of the way the information was very brokenly filtering out, and you got to have everyone freaking out and trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, it's a three-team trade.
Right.
You don't see that too often, and I'm sure it creates a lot of logistical headaches in the background for the NHL. So that was going through trade, or not even getting to a trade call for at least a couple of hours before we found out the details of that. All things considered, it plays out like every trade plays out when a superstar like that is involved. And the surface, it looks like Carolina walked away massive
I agree.
winners, right? Because you're getting Mikko Rantanen. It was like that when Erik Karlsson got traded. It was like that when Jack Eichel got traded. Like it's when all these guys get traded, it looks like a win. Now, to be fair, Jack Drury has settled in pretty nicely in his first few games for Colorado. Nichas has played well, playing on a top line with McKinnon. I think it's a trade that will work out for both players. It's not like Nichas was having a bad season. He's having a great year. There was points this year,
leading the league.
20-plus games in, he was leading the league.
He's got like 65 points on the year. He's doing very well. Here's my thing.
Yeah.
As far as this season is concerned, the Carolina Hurricanes won that trade. They get the best player right now in the thing. They are clearly going for it. They clearly think he makes them he is a difference maker on that roster in a way that Marty Necas isn't. And I think that is perfectly reasonable and fair. I think if you're that team and you keep bumping your head up against the second round, I guess they've made the finals twice under Brindamore. The conference finals, sorry. But that's a great trade to make. He provides another level of game-breaking talent. He's the best player on that team, right? Yeah, he
Rantanen?
walks in as the best player on that team.
Yeah.
Maybe you would say Sebastian Aho, but even then, no.
League-wide talent. If you before the trade happened, if you asked who's better, Rantanen or Aho, you say Rantanen, right? So definitely.
But if you're Colorado, I don't know that there's any other way you get a player who is as good and as young as Necas without doing something like this, right? Necas is 26, I think, but he just turned 26, so he's not super young, but he's younger. He's got another year on his deal. He makes less than $7 million. He provides you flexibility moving forward. Jack Drury is kind of the perfect third line center prospect, right? That's kind of what you're hoping he becomes is, maybe Nick Bonino-y.
What I love about it is when Colorado's won it, they've won it all with the roster they had when they won it, and it was they had more depth. They had Kadri, they had because
Burakovsky.
Some guys were on contracts that weren't a problem at that point. I respect the balls to look at it and Colorado say, listen, look what we've had over the last couple of years where two of our big guys go out and we have nothing. How many times have we looked at that Colorado lineup? It's, Landeskog's been out forever, but then Rantanen misses a game, Drouin goes out, and there's nothing. It's one line and then 3/4 lines after that. They haven't had anything. And to look at it and say, listen, we don't want to get into a Toronto situation where we're paying three guys north of $12 million and we can't do anything else with the rest of this roster. We're just piecing it together. They know that they're going to have to play Cale Makar more than Nathan MacKinnon. And I don't think they were comfortable having to pay two guys more than Nathan MacKinnon. And then also, like I said, having three guys over 12, and Makar probably gets 13 or 14 because of the value for his position. To be thinking, okay, we're going to move this guy out. We bring in Necas. He's cost controlled for this year, and next year at 6.5. Even if we re-sign him, it's probably around 7 or 8. So you're saving about $5 million there that you can spread out across the rest of the roster and still be competitive, right? They have no pressure in the sense. Again, it's tough to let a superstar like that go, but they have no pressure to win as if they've never won.
Right.
They've done it. They've got it done. Now they're kind of aspect of it okay, we need to keep this going for as long as we can, and the best way to do that is to not pay three guys over $12 million. I appreciate the boldness of the move, even though I think, again, Mikko Rantanen is the best player, and I as of right now I would say Carolina won that just because, again, he is the best player and it's such a good fit for them. But I think, like you're saying, down the road you can look at this from a Colorado perspective that it's going to give them so much more flexibility to feel the competitive team for longer. That's the win for Colorado, right? Is that they have more flexibility to stay competitive.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what it is. It bolsters their depth. And again, maybe you think Necas has another level, and maybe you think part of that other level is the fact that you're going to get to play him with Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar. Mm-hmm. You know, and maybe you help Necas make the jump from a 60 to 70 point player to like an 80 point plus player. Like if he becomes a point a game player and it allows you to keep Gerard, you still have Casey Middlestat, you have Jack, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you can go at it another top 6 forward to that group. So
what does Necas cost on his next contract? Like if everything goes super well,
8.
9 million.
Yeah, 8, 9 max. But I would say
You know what
you
I
could
mean?
probably
Because
get
he's
him
already
for.
getting 6.5 now. So like it feels like, maybe if the cap jumps or something like that, like in a big way, like they think it might, he could get like 9 million bucks. But like, okay, that's what you were paying Rantanen fucking right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're going to be able to keep other guys, and I get that it sucks, and like, I think if the biggest argument against it is how much everybody seems to be shook, like in that room, like even the coaching staff,
Yeah.
feels like they were kind of all caught off guard. So like, if there's a real downside to it, it's that. It's the idea of taking this very competitive core and messing with it on a level that like
Mm-hmm.
throws everybody into a funk, and maybe you burn this season. But
Yeah, but
maybe you go
that's
into
yeah.
next season in a better position.
That's what I would say with that is like that's a this season thing to worry about, and if it does, it does. But it was a move you had to make, and you take that with a grain of salt, and you say like that's a consequence of having to make that trade. But then you go into next season, and guys will have gotten over it at that point and can move on from it, and you'll have made moves in the off season to hopefully counteract that. But from a Carolina perspective, like this is amazing. This is exactly the type of player they needed to bring in a superstar like this. We've talked about this forever. Like, Aho's great, Svechnikov's great, Seth Jarvis, I love the kid. I think he's a great fit there. But they needed something. They needed an elite player on their roster. And to get a player like Mikko Rantanen, like that just doesn't happen that often, really. Almost ever, to bring a player like that in. The question for Carolina now is, because I know there's been reports of other teams hoping they could sign him. They have to get him signed, right? Like, there's no world where he doesn't re-sign in Carolina as long as he's enjoying his time there.
Oh no, I think they can totally afford to let him. Like, I don't think they need to re-sign him immediately. I think they can let that go till the summer.
Well, yeah, for sure. But I mean, like, they have to sign him this summer, right? Like, he can't walk to another team. If you don't win it. If you win it, whatever, but, like...
I don't know. Like, what if you think Mitch Marner is available this summer?
I don't know, man.
And you think you can get Mitch Marner for less than it would cost you to get Rantanen? Mitch Marner's a better defensive player. Maybe he fits Rod Brendamore's style a little bit more. I get what you're saying. But, like, someone will give you a third-round pick at the draft to get his rights.
Does this team... So this team loses Taylor Hall, which, whatever.
Great.
They lose Jack Roslovich. They lose Dmitry Orlov and Brent Burns after this year. And Freddie Anderson. It frees up almost $20 million in cap. So if Kochekov's your guy, and losing Hall, it's not losing anything because you just got him. Losing Roslovich, I feel like you can replace that either internally or somewhere else for around the same cost.
You can bring him back.
Yeah, exactly. But so they have more than enough money in that opening up of cap space to sign Rantanen to that anywhere between 12 and 14 if they want. They use the remaining that they get from, which is another $4 or $5 million, to just go and replace. You don't need to replace both Burns and Orlov. Just bring in one defenseman to go along with Slavin and Walker and Gostisbehere and Chatfield, and then they've got Nikishin, who I think is coming over as well. Like that, my thing is with not re-signing him. Like, there's not a lot of other holes they have to fill. The rest of that roster is ready to go. They just need a Rantanen type player. If you don't re-sign him, like if you sign Marner and you think he's a better fit, whatever, like that, you're still fulfilling that need. My concern is, like, if you're Carolina, like, you can't let him go and then just not get a player of that caliber. Like, the whole reason they're making this trade is because they needed this to be competitive. This isn't a one and done. Their window's over if they don't win it this year. They have a young enough core to be able to keep going for it. And Rantanen's young enough. Like, you have to do everything in your power to lock down this guy and take several runs at it, because we've talked about how good this team is, and they've just needed the firepower upgrade to be able to be a real competitive threat. It doesn't get much better than being able to add a player like Mikko Rantanen. So I just think the focus for them, for sure, like, you have to do everything you possibly can to sign this guy. And again, like, if you're Carolina and you can give him $14 million, I don't think it's ridiculous. because you're paying Aho 9.75 and Svechnikov 7.75, and Seth Jarvis 7.4.
I'm sorry, how much did you say you're going to pay him?
He's asking for 14.
He's not getting 14. He's not a $14 million player.
No, but he could be to Carolina, is what I'm saying. And they're in a position that they could pay it if they had to, and it wouldn't hurt them. I don't think it ultimately lands there, but they...
Yeah, sure. There's a world where they can overpay him and make him a $14 million guy, and it doesn't completely ruin everything. I think he should be their priority this summer. Their priority, assuming it works and he gets along with everybody and it's all cool, their priority should be to bring him back. I do not think it is a moral imperative that they re-sign him. I do not think it makes the move not worth it. I think this is exactly the type of swing you take at this point in your team's run.
Yeah, it's what it costs to rent Mikko Rantanen, regardless. Like, what they gave up is what it would cost to get a rental of that quality.
My question. I wonder if, with Brent Burns being done on contract, I wonder if they would call and take on Erik Karlsson.
Possibly, yeah.
Who they had wanted to get rumored when they were looking at Brent Burns and even after.
Yep, I can see a desire and a fit there. I mean, Shane Gostisbehere's been great for them, but it certainly wouldn't hurt them losing Burns to bring in another offensive defenseman.
And a right-sided shot as well. That's the thing about more than anything is you're replacing the right shot with a right shot. You're not now playing the lefty-righty game. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like this is all really interesting to talk about the way we are right now because, like, we're talking about all these other teams taking all these big swings. And there's kind of a elephant in the room in terms of right now there is a big star who is rumored to be available. And I want to ask you, I think we both agree that because he is available, the Ducks should go and trade for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about Elias Pettersson. I was going to wait, but there's no reason to. But I wonder how you feel about the idea that if he wasn't openly available, if you think that the Ducks should be looking to make a big trade.
So if he wasn't available, if they should be just kind of scouring around for it?
So if there wasn't a specific name out there, right? This is much more like intellectually, conceptually like. Mm-hmm. If you remove the fact that we know Pettersson is available, and you think of it much more as like fantasy trading, of like, ooh, it would be cool if they could go get like a Pettersson type. Mm-hmm. Go make a Godfather offer for one of these guys. Like, do you think you've seen enough from this team to justify that?
No. It's not something, barring certain names coming available, that you say you have to take a swing at, that I would just say you should just be trying to hunt this down. I don't... Again, like, it's easier to say when we've talked about Marner because his name's been out there, and that makes sense. The Ducks should go and try and get that because his name's out there, and guys like that don't come available. It's the same thing we talked about with Rantanen, and if he's available, then you've got to explore it because guys like that don't come available often.
Right.
So, in a vacuum, without knowing any of those guys are available, I don't think it's something the Ducks should, want to do, or I guess like be actively just like searching for that. But when those guys come available, I certainly think I'm contradicting myself, but I certainly think it's when they do come available, if the age profile and everything makes sense, then they should be guys that they should be looking at. So like I would say all three of them that we talked about, Rantanen, now obviously done, but Marner and Elias Pettersson are all guys the Ducks should be looking at trying to bring in whatever way possible. Marner looks like more of a free agent acquisition in the summer. Pettersson looks like he very possibly could get dealt. And that's one where the Ducks should be looking at giving up some assets to bring a guy like that in. It doesn't, I think, tip the needle enough for them to make a playoff push this year, but it gets them a elite player in the door right now. Because the question marks we have with this team is, okay, we got a lot of good young players, but none of them have taken the step towards being a superstar yet.
I would argue we do not have a lot of good young players. We have a lot of promising young players, and none of them have become good players yet.
Yeah,
and we're waiting to see if they're going to become good players, and if they do, are they going to become great players?
Yeah. If you can move some of those guys and eliminate some of the question marks to get a player who is already a great player, I think you do it. If it bites you in the ass, it bites you in the ass, but guess what? That biting you in the ass, you still got a great player. Like, the outcome is not bad. Like, you still got a great player, and it just so happens that the guys you traded also turned out to be great players. Like, it's not a bad outcome at the end of the day.
Right.
So yeah, I would love it. Like, we've talked about potential trades and everything, and we've talked about it for all three of those players, but specifically and more recently Elias Pettersson and what that could look like and what Vancouver would want. And I would stretch the limit pretty far of what I'd be willing to give up to bring him into the organization. There's not many guys who've proven over the last couple of years they can be 100-point players in the NHL. Elias Pettersson is one of them. To bring that into this organization, to pair up with guys like Leo Carlson and a lot of the good young players we have coming on the way, or the promising young players that we have on the way. If you have to sacrifice a few of those guys that are here now, guys like Terry or McTavish or Lacombe, to get it done, there's enough still in the pipeline that you can surround Elias Pettersson and Leo Carlson with those players. So I'm all for it, man. It's my dream trade at this moment in time. I do think the rumors coming out now that they could move both of them. Like, it's that bad that both Miller and Pettersson could go. And Pettersson seems to be the one they believe could get them the most value. So I do think one, if not both, are going to get moved. And the Ducks need to be in on that conversation for Pettersson. Not for Miller, but for Pettersson.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think it's an interesting question because, again, you can look at this roster and project the role everybody fits on a team where basically they keep this team for the next 4 years and they make the Western Conference Finals once, right? It's 5 years, something like that. But you're like, okay, they make that one run, right? Like, you can see where on paper this team projects is like, oh, this is this and this is that and this is that. And the question you always end up having to ask yourself is the potential significant enough that I should defer the certainty? And I think the most fascinating, I think the thing that makes it a very interesting thing for Anaheim is that the three players you would assume would be some basis of the trade would be Zegras, Terry, and McTavish. And Troy Terry would be them trading for a guy that, like, oh, we've seen this guy get 70 points and 30 goals. Like, we know he has this in him, and we think we can get him back onto that trajectory where he looked like he could be a 75-point guy, right? Maybe even sneak into the low 80s, maybe, 40 goals, things like that. Like, you can talk something to that. Then you got Trevor Zegras, where you're like, well, him and the coach don't get along. He's completely had all the joy and, all this shit, like, sapped out of him. He looks like he fucking hates his life. We're going to bring him in. We're going to let him free. We're going to let him just fucking go for it. He's going to be great. He's going to realize all that offensive potential, and he's going to provide a dynamism to our offense that we have no other way of getting. And he's going to really work well with Quinn Hughes. And then you have McTavish, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is a guy who projects to be a top six center with a heavy shot, should get you 25 goals a year, and if he develops properly, should be playable in literally all situations, and a guy that is likely over the ice for you, over the boards for you in the end of a game. And all of those things are true in terms of what Vancouver is taking on, But all of those things are true in what Anaheim is giving up. And that's the thing I think is the most fascinating is like, do you think bringing in Pedersen makes keeping Terry a better choice than keeping Zegras? Right? Can Peterson raise Terry higher? Is Zegras unfixable? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, no, I see
how
what you're
the
saying.
pieces fit around what you think Elias Pettersson can do to this roster?
Yeah, the thing for me is I think before, because it seemed like they were going to keep one of them, I would have said they will. There's no way they would take Zegras and McTavish and a defenseman because they will want to still be competitive and they need a guaranteed asset. And the Ducks have that in Troy Terry. You know what you're going to get out of him, and there's potential to get more out of him. That slightly changes if they are looking to trade both, because that's if they trade both, they are rebuilding, retooling, whatever you want to call it,
100%.
and then it becomes a real possibility that maybe they look at some younger players instead, guys that they can mold over the next couple of years and hope pan out, instead of going for Troy Terry, who's a bit older and would make more sense for them if they were still trying to compete. So I could see it for sure, and I think all of it hinges on what their direction is going to be, because they're going to trade one of them. I feel pretty confident about that, just because this situation has gotten pretty ugly. If they're going to keep one, they're still going to be competitive. So in this situation, they keep JT Miller, they're still going to be competitive. I think it makes more sense for them to add Troy Terry to that mix and still get into the playoffs and try and make a run, and then retool in the offseason around those guys. If they move both, then certainly it makes more sense, I would think, to bring in Zegras and McTavish and a younger defenseman, and put those guys with Quinn Hughes and some of the other young players that they have in their roster, and trying like quickly rebuild on the fly with these younger guys. I think I'd be more comfortable saying like that would be the direction they would go there. But there's the good thing is the Ducks have kind of good options for both situations, right? Like they can make both situations work because of the assets that they have. So regardless of what Vancouver does, there's scenarios in which the Ducks can make it work either way.
So let's say you're Pat Verbeek, or you're you, and you're the GM of the Ducks, right? You get a phone call from Vancouver, and they go, Edward, here's what's up, man. I'm calling you first. You're first on my list to make this phone call. I want Trevor Zegras, I want Pavel Mintyukov, and I want your 2026 first round pick. And I'll give you Quinn Hughes.
Oh, this took a turn.
Do you say yes? Do you trade Zegras, Mintyukov, and next year's first for Quinn Hughes?
That is tough. I think with the quality that you get in Quinn Hughes, you probably I'd be contradicting myself to say no. I like what we have on defense a bit more, where I'm more intrigued about moving those assets in a trade for Elias Pettersson than I am Quinn Hughes. But it's very hard to turn down a player like Quinn Hughes, a Norris Trophy winner, a defenseman who can put up 80+ points in a season, right? Like it's hard to turn that down, and you would think in any big profile trade, the 2026 first is what it is. You're going to have to move one of Zegras, McTavish probably in those trades, and Mintyukov is the sacrifice there. But in the most unlikely or the most optimistic of situations, Mintyukov becomes 75% of Quinn Hughes, right? So I think you have to be based off of that, right? Like even if things pan out where Zegras and Mintyukov go to Vancouver and fulfill their potential, them at that fulfilled potential still probably makes sense as pieces to get Quinn Hughes, right? So I would say yes. It wouldn't be near top of my list by any means. I like the defensemen we have in our system, and I'd like to see them develop. And I'd rather go get the forward, an elite forward to add to this roster, because we haven't seen the progression there. But yeah, I think you can't say no to that deal.
Because here's the thing. If you make that trade today, that means you get the full 365 days of his 26, 27, 28, and 29 seasons. You still get the last 4 years of his 20s if you make that trade today. That is why, to me, I think you would give up. I think you give up Minchikov to get Quinn Hughes, who is one of the 2 best defensemen in the league.
Yeah.
Like, especially right now, like the way he's playing, like he might be the best defenseman in the league. Like,
It's
he's
Cale
playing
Makar
incredible.
and him,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
And you know how I feel about Charlie McAvoy and Adam Fox, and there's good players out there, right? There are good defensemen out there right now. And it's like, it feels like it's those 2 and everybody else.
Yeah, So
Would you rather trade McTavish than Zegras?
I would say, like, again, in that deal, I'd probably rather trade Zegras. But if we're talking Elias Pettersson, I think I'd rather trade McTavish. I'd rather have a 1-2 punch down the middle of Pettersson, Karlsson, and then have Zegras still for the wing, or to be able to kind of split center duties with Pettersson or whoever he's with. Whereas, if it's bringing in a defenseman, then I'd rather keep McTavish and be able to run Karlsson McTavish as your 1-2 punch down the middle, right? So it depends on who you're getting. But yeah, if we're talking Pettersson, like, I'm more than comfortable. And again, who knows if the value's there? I'm basically basing it off of the Mikko Rantanen situation and saying, like, okay, Troy Terry, somewhat comparable to Martin Netjas, and McTavish, I would say, is probably more valuable than Jack Drury, and you could probably say at this point in time Martin Netjas is more valuable than Troy Terry because of the way he's played this season. And then you throw the picks in there, and then you throw, because the contract situation is a little bit more solidified there, you throw in the defenseman, right, as the kind of final piece to that of what it should be enough to get it done. So again, you say McTavish, Terry, and one of Leno, Lacombe, Zellweger, something like that. I think that's what it would take to get it done. I don't know many more teams that could really beat that. Like, there's been people who've talked about Buffalo, and maybe Dylan Cousins is a piece that they include. Like, unless Buffalo's giving up Dylan Cousins and Owen Power to bring him in, again, it could be bias in the way I value our players compared to other teams, but I feel like if you could go in with that offer, I'd be hard pressed to find too many teams that could beat that.
Yeah, I think, like, I think for me, the trade that I would want to make would be McTavish, Lacombe, this year's first. I think that's probably the trade I want to make. And then you say you can pick, you can have the Toronto third, or you can have, like, a B. Like, you can have Isaac Lundestrom, just a nice depth player, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. Like,
would you like top 2 or top 3 protected the pick this year, and then if that's the case, then next year's is unprotected?
I think, honestly, I think I'd just trade the fucking pick.
Yeah. Because
Elias Pettersson's better than anybody you're going to get in this draft.
I just think more of a, you're bad this year, and a Pettersson doesn't help that, so you're going to get a top 5 pick regardless. I think a whole off season, being able to kind of add to this team as well, that 2026 pick, there's more of a likelihood that 2026 pick could be middle of the pack if you make a playoff push, right? So
let's say you're crazy good next year out of nowhere. Yeah. Now you can't trade your 2026 pick. So now you're taking it from another year forward, which is fine if you want to. You
get the prospect that you drafted that maybe allows you to trade some other guys, any other prospects in the system, to go out and get better now. So it goes hand in hand. I see the value behind it. I'm just thinking window wise. I mean, it all depends too, right? Like the top end of this draft is a lot of forwards, and if you're bringing in Elias Pettersson, do you really need do you need that pick this year to draft a forward in the top 5 if you've got Pettersson and Seneca and Carlson and Zegras and Pastuov and whoever, right? Like, is it even worth it? So it might make more sense organizationally to trade the 2025 first and look at next year and hoping to get a defenseman in the top half of the draft for 2026. So I see it. I see the value there. I'm not too partial on it either way. I just would I would say like lottery protected at the very least. That God forbid you win, you get first or second.
No,
that
for
that
sure.
would hurt. That would hurt a little bit, right? Because guys like Haggins and Misa can probably jump. Schaefer. God forbid you miss out on Schaefer or something like that, right? Like those are guys that can jump into the roster right away, or should be able to jump into the roster if not next year, the year after that. I think that helps you with your timeline a little bit more. So I would protect it against that because there's really only 3 players in this draft. I'd be like, oh, damn, we missed out on those guys. Like I'm not a huge fan of the depth in this draft, but it would hurt to miss out on a Matthew Schaefer or a Michael Misa or
that's fair.
or Haggins, right? So I would much rather put the faith in. Now, God forbid you're bad next year and you miss out on Gavin McKenna. That sucks, and you have no choice because you've lottery protected this pick and that's unprotected. You can look at that and say that's a nightmare scenario, but I can't see a world where this team adds Pettersson and is worse next year, right? Like, regardless of letting go of McTavish and Lacombe, if they're keeping Terry and adding Pettersson to that roster, there's no way they're worse next year, right? So, I mean, Cronin could find a way, but I just can't see it.
All right, so let's say this. Let's say you don't trade for Pettersson. You fire Cronin. You get a dead cat bounce. You win a couple of games. The lottery happens. And you get jumped. And you end up with the 9th pick. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Would you trade that 9th pick, Mason McTavish, and Drew Hellison for Artemi Panarin at the draft?
No.
Who would you trade that for? Is your Pasternak only?
Yeah, it's got to be somebody. Panarin's like what, 33 at this point, right? Yeah, he's 33.
Yeah, but he's only got 2 years left, and he's a right shot forward and MVP level.
I don't think we're close enough that 2 years of Panarin is we're going to be able to get anywhere close to winning, right? By just adding Panarin to the mix. I like the concept of adding a player of that talent, but I think you've got to push under 30 at that point to really optimize that and to make it worth it, right? Like Pasternak, you talk about whether Boston would move on from him. I know he's come up in rumors a little bit. You look at him because I think he's 28 now. He's going to be turning 29. Like that at least gives you a couple more years to build around that and try and make a run at it. But I would say you'd have to be looking at like somebody 29 or younger at that point.
Pasta turns 29 in May.
Yeah, if you're going to move those assets, I would say you got to look for somebody south of 30. And Pasternak's kind of just pushing that. But then again, like you could keep those assets and potentially sign Mitch Marner as a free agent in the offseason as well, right? So if he makes it there, which I think he will, I don't think Toronto's going to be able to get it done, but there's a lot of options, man, this year. It feels like there's more options for potential superstar talent than there has been in a while. When you talk, Rantanen's obviously been resolved, but before this, you knew the Rantanen situation was going to come to a head. Elias Pettersson's name is out there. Mitch Marner's name is out there. Pasternak's name is not as actively, but has been floated as a possibility if Boston needs to shake things up. As a name that's out there, like it feels like there's more of that this year than there has been in years past. And it's exactly what the Ducks need to be looking at to bring in, young superstars like that to help kind of take this roster and this team to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of what I was trying to get to earlier, which you just said now, which is without having a specific name and a tangible concept of the player you're adding, it's hard to look at this roster and think that you should go out trying to make a big trade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you could go out and get Brady Kachuk or, Quinn Hughes or something crazy like that, like you obviously do it every time. But the idea that the team should be looking for that, I think, is really interesting because it puts a lot of faith in basically Leo Carlson.
Yeah.
Because I think you only go out looking to make those trades if you're like Leo Carlson is, at worst, a 1B center.
I do have to address something there. I would not throw Brady Kachuk in that conversation for me as a guy to go out and spend the same assets on over a Pedersen or something like that.
I don't think he'd be as expensive as a Pedersen would be, but I'll tell you right now, if you told me I get to add 35 to 45 goals every single year, like he just scores 35 goals, bro. Like I don't know what to tell you. He just fucking does it. He just goes out there, he stands in the goalie's front pocket, and he scores 35 goals a year. It just is what he does. And I don't know how you don't look at this team and go, yeah, it would be nice to have someone who just consistently scores goals. Because he doesn't. You don't need him to be a Richard candidate. You need him to be just, oh yeah, we won 2-1. Brady Kachuk had a goal in the third on the power play, took a deflection. Like it's just, like it's almost like kind of what it seemed like Reinhardt could be, right? Like he's clearly reached a whole other level with this, insane goal scoring. But the idea they're like, no, man, he's just going to give you 30 to 35 goals a year, like almost like the best version of Brian Rust, which again sounds wrong, but because Brady's better than that. But you get what I'm saying, where it's just like this guy's in our top 6 every single year. He scores this many goals every single year, and we're fine. We don't have to worry about it.
The ceiling's not as high, but the floor is there, right? So I guess there's a level of consistency. Right? Yeah,
he's going to play like an insane person. He's clearly, because of how money he is, you can always just be like, oh yeah, he's going to have 1 year where he just pops for 55. It just might happen at any point.
For me, like the difference for me with him versus a Marner or Pedersen is I feel you still need to build the right assets around him for him to be successful. Whereas I feel like you add a potential 100-point player like a Marner or Pedersen that raises the ceiling of the entire team a little bit more. You've just added that dynamic ability to this team. I really like Brady Kachuk, don't get me wrong, but I think it lacks a little bit in comparison to the other two of what it would add to the team. There's more work that has to be done beyond just adding Brady Kachuk, whereas I think adding a Marner and adding a Pedersen, that's 99% of the job done there. And then you see what else you have in the system already to build around that.
I see what you're saying for sure, but think about it this way. 3 years from now, you have a top 6 of Brady Kachuk, Leo Carlson, Beckett Seneca, Cutter Gauthier, Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry. And you're just like, yeah, I can see a version where that top 6 is really effective and there really isn't a break from one or the other. Like the idea of Brady Kachuk's just absolute petulance at the net front with the kind of give and go game that Zegras and Terry have shown they can play together, and that kind of creativity. That's a fucking great second line. Oh, I put Cutter on that line. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You get what I'm trying to say.
Either way, it's Carlson and Seneca can do the same
Carlson,
thing.
Cutter, Seneca, same shit. But I just, I think Brady Kachuk. You know what I'll say? To me, he's like adding Devin Taves.
Yeah. Like when Colorado added Devin Taves, like
Yeah, like
a piece
he's
of the
not.
puzzle.
He's clearly not the best player at his position on your team,
Mm-hmm.
and he's not the best player on the team. But he is so exactly like I think Devin Taves is fucking incredible. Like I think he's better than Brady Kachuk, but I think there's a level of certainty to both of them
Mm-hmm.
that provides extra value
My,
beyond their
yeah.
presence alone.
My thing with that, and the Devin Taves situation as an example, is we don't have a McKinnon, a Rantanen, a McCarr, right? Like Carlson, if he becomes the 1A, you could say that's one of them, but you add those guys to rosters when you have the rest of the pieces that have almost already panned out or showing they could pan out. Right
Well,
now, there's
that's
no proof
yes.
that could be it. So my worry is like you bring Brady Kachuk in, and a lot of those don't pan out, and then you're like, oh man, like what happens now, right? Like he needs something around him for that the rest of it to work together. Where again, the Marner Pedersen situation again, they still need teams around them, and it doesn't change per player, but those guys are going to I just raise the level a little bit more, that you're not relying as much on everybody panning out, right? Like you can fill in the blanks a little bit easier that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Anaheim, you need two players specifically to pan out, and it's Minchikov and Carlson. Because I think it's fair to say that Dostal is clearly panning out, which means your high level starter, like your elite positional player, maybe it isn't on the wing, but you have a goalie. And now you're kind of building closer along the idea of the Tampa Bay model, where like they've got Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman and Andre Vasilevsky. And like I think Leo Carlson and Papa Minchkov are the two most important players on the Ducks roster right now. And I think Beckett Seneca is the most important prospect in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Beckett Seneca doesn't hit, they are in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that as well, as being the three most important pieces that need to pan out is Carlson, Seneca, and Minchkov. And then the rest of it, you just hope a few of them kind of fill that out, right? You hope Zellweger or Luneau or one of those guys can come in and can be pieces to the rest of that roster. You hope Zegras, McTavish, one of those, Cutter Gauthier, one of those guys, two of those guys, can pan out and be part of the roster from there. But with Carlson, Minchikov, Seneca, like you need those guys to pan out, right? Like you need that to work out and succeed, because we're at a point where we're still waiting for some of the picks before them to pan out, right? We're waiting to see from Zegras. We're waiting to see from McTavish. We see it in glimpses here and there, but
right,
we're getting to that point in time where these guys someone needs to become a superstar or an elite level talent. It doesn't need. I'm not saying top 10 in the league, but they need to be consistently in the conversation of a 70 to 80 point player. Right, or for
sure.
McTavish's case, a good two-way guy who can get 25, 30 goals and 60, 65 points, right? Like that's what we're waiting for from these guys, is to kind of get close to that potential that we expect, and we're not there yet. Which I think why adding, and why we're even having this conversation, is why adding using some of those guys to add a player who's there already helps you kind of accelerate that. That weight and that need, because you've added that guy now, and you've given up some of the what ifs to get there, but now you've just leapfrogged a few steps, right? And when you have as many assets as the Ducks do, you have that luxury to go out and do that, right? And take advantage isn't the right word, but I'll use it. Like take advantage of the teams that are looking to move these players out the door, the guys that don't often come available in
right.
moves like that, right? So we could talk about these endlessly because we both want it to happen so bad. But for me right now, like the two the two best situations for the Ducks are, the first one is trying to figure out this whole Elias Pettersson situation, because I think it's going to be resolved before the end of the season. If not that, then you pivot to looking into the Mitch Marner season in the offseason, what's going on there, and if he's going to hit free agency. And then like a little wild card is if Rantanen does hit free agency and doesn't re-sign in Carolina, maybe you look at that as a potential to use the amount of cap space the Ducks have to kind of fly in there. Same thing as Marner, but just if Rantanen was to make it there, you could fly in and try and swoop in on that situation. So a lot of options, right, for sure. And there's a few hidden ones. Maybe a Pasternak situation develops, but there are certainly moves that I would hope to see the Ducks involved in trying to make something like that happen.
Yeah, especially when you see tonight Calgary makes that big trade and trades Kuzmenko, Pelletier, and a couple of picks for Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. Like, that's a really good trade for them. Like, that's a great move for them. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to see that front office going out and like rewarding that room and that roster.
They were supposed to be awful. And
they were supposed to be terrible. And a big part of that has been Dustin Wolf. But, when a big part of your team finding success is your goalie, you go out and improve the other positions. Mm-hmm. That's what you do. You're like, okay, well, let's go see if we can add, 2 top 6 forwards with with like a floor of, we think they're probably at worst middle 6 guys. But we definitely think that these guys have a lot of value. So I think, I guess, we talked about a little bit of like, because we had missed so much time and there was so much to talk about, like how we wanted to approach this, and we kind of talked about like vibes and stuff, but like maybe this is where we'll just wrap it up, which is just like, in terms of this team and things that can be done or should be done or need to be done, like I would say I spend most of my like free time Ducks mental energy thinking about players to add, but I think that's because I am so completely certain that Greg Cronin needs to go before anything has changed, that there's nothing to think about it. And I think that's the thing about this season that I was kind of talking about earlier that's hard, is like there's no reason to think any of this is going to get any better under Greg Cronin.
Yeah.
And it makes it hard to be like, all right, like what's going on, other than selling on Fabry and Dumoulin and maybe one of the young defensemen on a sweetheart deal that you can get, you know what I mean, or part of a bigger swing. But
yeah,
it's like an emotional tank year without having the benefit of like being like, all right, we're gonna get an Adam Fantilli or something like that. Like, we already have Leo, and we got Beckett last year, and it's great. But like, if this was gonna feel this way, I'd rather have a top 3 pick.
Yeah,
this sucks.
It just feels, again, stuck in an interim, because we know. We know we don't, but we know that like Greg Cronin is not the guy long term. But even when he got hired, we felt it was an interim in for the time being, whip the team into shape type hire as a head coach. But he wasn't going to be the long term head coach to bring this team back to the playoffs and competing again. So it's just draining to know that you're kind of stuck in the interim, right? Like, you just know eventually he's going to have to get fired. You hope it's sooner rather than later. You just want to get to the point with whoever is behind the bench is the guy that we want to move forward with long term. Like, that's just where I'm at this point. Like, I'm sick of like the interim in between guys that we bring in and he's not the guy, right? Like, you just want to have that feeling that, okay, we've got the good young players coming in. We've got promising prospects. We're drafting high up. We're building the pieces in the organization. The hire behind the bench has to match that now. We've got to bring a guy in that we believe is going to be the guy that's going to turn this around and bring this organization back to the playoffs and help develop these young players. And when in the meantime, waiting for that is draining, man. Like it does. The good games we have are just overshadowed by the fact that this guy is still here, and then you get reports. We talked about the Labushkin thing in the past, and you get the Silverberg stuff that comes out that just kind of doubles down on the fact that he's just an asshole and not a great guy to be around, not a great guy to be coached by, and it's exhausting because none of the positives feel like positives when that's kind of just like looming in the background that this is the guy still coaching this team, and we all kind of know that like long term that's not going to be the case. So you're just sitting here endlessly waiting for that situation to resolve itself.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know that there's anything I can add to that. I think you said it pretty perfectly, man.
Yeah. I don't know when. We've talked about this. Like, I thought before the end of January, and here we are, January 31st, and he's still head coach of the Ducks. And I think we'll wake up.
To be fair, it's January 30th here, and he's still coach. So
Yeah.
I've got an hour and a half to be placated.
We'll wake up tomorrow, and I imagine this loss isn't going to affect anything because they just rattled off 3 wins in a row before this. We're getting to the point of the season where he's probably just going to ride out the rest of the year. Like, well, you know what I mean? And then they'll make a decision in the offseason and probably fire him there. But we're, 40 plus?
51.
51 games into the season, so 31 left. Like, when you get closer to that 25-20 mark,
yeah,
you don't see many coaches get fired that late in the season. Like, it's just, okay, we're just going to push it to the end of the year now because there's nothing to fight for. There's no reason to kind of switch him out in the middle of the season, and we'll let him go in the off season and see what other candidates are available then, and it's a better time to make a decision. So I think we're very, very close to that scenario being the possibility now because of the amount of games remaining, which, again, it's exhausting. Just knowing that, we've got 30 plus more games of this, and then maybe we'll get the decision in the offseason because it's still not a guarantee. I hope to God Pat Verbeek doesn't look at this and say, yeah, let's have another year of this, but you just don't know.
No, you don't. That's the thing. It's weird. It's weird, man. I don't know if we've talked about this or not, but like it is really weird to me that Pat Verbeek was the captain of the Hartford Whalers team that fired Pierre Maguire and celebrated that he was no longer their coach.
Mm-hmm.
And like he went to the press and like gave a quote that was like, yeah, everybody's in a much better mood that fucking guy is gone. So like he of all people understands the impact of having a coach that isn't working can have negatively, and then the impact positively it can have letting it loose. But I do also think like he seems to be very pragmatic, and it's funny you were saying the closer you get to that 25-20 games, the less likely it is you're going to see somebody fired, and I think you're right. But I also think if you're someone like Pat Verbeek and you're going to fire the guy in the offseason, like, fuck it, give Rich Clune 20 games to see if under a whole new coach, you can just get something out of these guys to give you some confidence going in and to have a better idea of how your summer looks. That I think is the opportunity cost that is lost by not firing him sooner than later and not giving somebody else a chance to just come in and just basically just open all the windows and just be like, let's just get some fucking air in here. This sucks. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of value in that. I think Rich Clune is a good young coach, or is a young coach. I think what he's done with the power play and with the penalty kill, while significantly ineffective, has been interesting, and I'm very interested in giving him more power and influence over the way the team plays. And I've said this to you before offline. Part of me is afraid that we get our forever coach this summer, and part of me is afraid that forever coach is Joe Quenpo. But I do think the worse it looks in Pittsburgh, there's an outside chance that somebody like Mike Sullivan could be available to come in and coach this team. So
yeah, I think if the Pittsburgh fire sale does happen, obviously Dubas has come out and kind of denied that, but if it does happen, whether it's now or the off season, I don't see the reason for Mike Sullivan to stick around, right? Yeah. Like he might as well look for a different opportunity at that point. That would be near the top of my list, if not at the top of my list of potential hires of guys that would be available. But yeah, I don't know, man. We'll have to see. Like for me to really emotionally get back in this season, I need to see him gone. And again, we said this from the beginning, like the on ice stuff and the play, like we knew it was going to be up and down. We knew it was going to be a roller coaster. We knew there was going to be good times and bad times, and I was ready for that. And that's what it's been. Like it hasn't been what it's potentially a little bit better results wise than I expected. That they're 9 points over a wild card. They're not rooted right in the basement. But it's just the whole coaching situation surrounding it makes it just so unenjoyable and so much worse that like it feels worse than the seasons where we were near the bottom. Like it just the whole atmosphere and environment feels worse. Watching the play, just watching the team feels worse because of that kind of looming shadow. We're all kind of done with this approach to it, and the stories coming out from former players just kind of adds to that. So. I don't know, man. We'll see. Like, I need emotionally, I need a coaching change just for a reset with this team to kind of feel better about the whole situation. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much where I'm at. At this point, it's just fucking like misery humidity. It's just in the air and it's on your skin. It just sucks. And the sooner we can move on from that, the happier I'll be.
Let's hope next time we jump on. Cronin's been fired. Mike Sullivan's been let go by the Penguins and takes over, and we've made an Elias Pettersson trade. So,
God, man, what a way to go out of the year!
Yeah,
that would be the ultimate. We suck, but mic drop.
Yeah, we'll see. If one of those happens, I'd be happy. One of them. I need one of them. I don't care. Cronin getting fired. I guess the Mike Sullivan situation is kind of Cronin has to get fired to have that, or we get Elias Pettersson.
That's not true. Mike Sullivan getting fired would be good because then we can go, hey, you know who's out there? Mike Sullivan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The sooner he gets fired, the sooner he's able to be hired. And you get even if again you get Clune to coach 15 games, like Mike Sullivan's agent and Pat Verbeek can start working on contract details and stuff like that, and Sullivan can jump on it. Anyways, none of this matters. It's like 5 a.m. for you or some bullshit. So.
Yeah, but we'll be back with another one soon, hopefully. Obviously, trade deadline's coming up in a month and a bit. It's usually, was it end of March or is it early
Beginning of March?
Beginning of March. So in about a little bit over a month.
It's like the 7th of March, I think.
We'll start to see the trades come in now, obviously, and we'll start to see them pick up a little bit more. But we'll be back hopefully in a week or so, just to update things if we've got something. We'll have to see what's going on. This is the time of year where you either have a lot or you have nothing. And obviously, since the last break, we've had a lot to discuss. But we'll hop up on here again. But it was nice to jump back on, man. It was good.
Yeah, and the season's been just as weird, like off ice, away from hockey, as it has been like on and off ice about the Ducks. So, just one of those things. Definitely get back on here before the trade deadline, and we'll have some version of Four Nations.
Yeah.
To talk about. Congratulations to Finland on their bronze medal, since Samuel Ersson is now going to be filling in for Jacob Markstrom.
Still a better goaltender than what Canada
has.
It's
going to be Olmark. It's going to be Olmark is going to be the starter, and they're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. But it's just like Samuel Ersson being the guy you're picking up isn't great.
I love it, yeah. And Philly will trade him out because Torts doesn't like him. So he'll be out the door soon, just like the rest of their team.
We could do a whole hour on what the fuck they're doing over there. It's so wild to me, but let's just wrap this up. It's crazy. I don't know what they're doing.
All right. Well, it was great being back. Nice. Appreciate you guys coming out and listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Adios, everybody.